A lot of software developers hate meetings, and there's a trend these days to be more asynchronous and have no meetings at all. Today, I'm going to use my experience of over 20 years and give you some tips on why meetings are really critical, and I've got 6 reasons for you that make them absolutely essential. To survive and thrive, you must adopt a product-driven mindset. So as I started preparing for this topic today, I put all these notes together and I asked AI to help me organize my thoughts, and I asked it, how long is it going to take to do this video? And it said 45 minutes. And so I had to cut it down and focus on what really matters. And as a developer, they have a different perspective of meetings and why they like meetings and why they hate meetings. As an engineering manager, I have a whole different set of viewpoint, right? But I think we can all agree that we don't like meetings. We want them to be productive. And most of us are used to having daily stand-up meetings. And yes, there are some people that argue we shouldn't have those at all, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I definitely agree that I don't like status meetings for the sake of status meetings. Like if you can post on Slack or whatever and just tell me I did this thing, like I don't need a call with you for you to just tell me you did this thing. I've had teams before I've seen, they're like, okay, here's my update on ticket R2D2 C3PO. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I don't even know what the ticket numbers are. Like, this is a complete waste of time. I believe that the meetings are super critical for collaboration. And I've got 6 examples of that we're going to get into in a second. But first and foremost, I agree with that. I don't like status meetings that are just for status. They should be for collaboration. And the reason that developers don't like meetings is it makes them do a lot of context switching. As developers, we like to be heads down. We like to be solving problems. We want to be writing code. We need to get deep into work. So I totally agree. The last thing you want to do is like every hour of the day, you're making them stop to do that and go to some kind of meeting. That really kills productivity. But you know who else's productivity that kills? Us as managers. And it's one of the most difficult things in the world to be a software development manager who is an individual contributor who's writing code, solving problems, and trying to be a manager. I struggled with that for many, many years of my career because I naturally want to like be like the dog on the bone. Like I want to be focused on the problem, trying to fix whatever it is I'm trying to do. And if I have to go to a meeting, I end up in the meeting on my laptop still trying to solve the thing. Like I'm not even engaged in the meeting. And so that's one of my first tips for you. And like I said, I can totally relate to the struggle, okay? And you have to figure out how to context switch yourself. When you are an individual contributor working on some big technical problem, which is fine, but you have to totally make this context switch as a manager to be focused on how do I help everybody else be more productive. And that's why these meetings are actually super valuable. Again, I got 6 reasons. We're going to get into them in a second. But I think it's also important to know that when you have these meetings, they work best if they're, 2 to 3 people for a real problem solving sort of session, or, maybe 5 to 10 people. And maybe some of them are people that are just listening on the call and they're just trying to gain information versus collaborating on the call. You can't have like 10 people on the call and they're all talking. Like it doesn't even work. And so that's why it's also great to use recorded videos and Loom and AI generated meeting notes. You can just send to these people that need to know the information. But there's one huge caveat to this, and that's storytelling and visual storytelling are 10 times more powerful than just reading the text, okay? So it's easy enough to send a message to the team that says, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. But nobody's really going to understand the why unless you have the story to back it. And that's one of the powerful things about the meetings is getting people to stop and pay attention and tell the story. Like, hey, I'm going to tell you about our customer, this issue they had. And yeah, maybe it's a big, long, elaborate story, but at the end of the story, the team's really going to actually understand and relate to the problem instead of just reading the like one sentence that was in a Jira ticket. There is something way more powerful about having these meetings and getting people to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's one of the things I want you to walk away with from this video today. Is there something totally different about meetings versus just reading the text? There's a way more powerful story behind it, okay? And again, we're going to get into my 6 different reasons. But the irony of all this is all of you will say, well, I don't have time for this 5-minute meeting or 15-minute meeting, but everybody's got time to chat for 60 minutes. That's also a big problem. And ultimately, I do believe teams can work very asynchronously. But here's how you would gauge if your team can work very asynchronously. How much ownership and courage do the team members have? Now, let's first talk about ownership, right? Like, you can give them a small task or project and they really own it. Like, they really are driving this project, okay? The other one is courage. And courage is something we talk a lot about at Full Scale with our team, is the courage to speak up, to ask questions, to say when you need help. If you've got a bunch of team members that don't do that, asynchronous work does not work very well at all, because those people will just be quiet and dormant. You will hear nothing from them. The building could be on fire and they won't tell you about it. And you have to have a lot more meetings with them. And ultimately, you got to keep hammering on them of like to speak up. Like, you've got to have more courage in the meetings and collaborate more. Okay. So that's my first like overview of meetings in general. What I want to talk about though is the 6 reasons that meetings are super valuable. And the first one, being that this is the product driven channel, of course, is product knowledge. Talking about why. Why are we doing this? And forcing the team to understand, to validate assumptions, understand the users, have empathy for the users. Like, beating that drum as a manager, making sure everybody knows, like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? We're not here to write cool code and you want to get all sciencey about how it works. We're here to solve problems for the users, and you got to keep beating that drum, and you want everybody to understand that, because that will help them make better decisions and understand why they're building it, and if they should, are we doing something that we can take some risk on? We can like move fast and break things, or if we mess this up, it's like going to totally destroy the user and their life. Like, all this stuff matters, and you don't know this stuff unless you really understand the use cases and you understand why. And that relates directly to number 2, is understanding. If I tell somebody to do something via Slack and all I get back is a thumbs up emoji, do they really know what they need to do? They don't ask any questions. When you get somebody on video and we communicate with people on a day-to-day basis in the real world, so much about communication is body language, right? I want to be able to tell somebody something. I can look deep into their soul and their eyes, and I know, do they understand what I just told them? Or do they look confused? You can't do that via asynchronous communication unless the people that you're dealing with have a lot of courage, which I mentioned earlier, to acknowledge the fact that they don't know and ask those questions. And if you've worked with your team long enough, eventually you will have that working relationship with them. But especially new team members, you've got to get them on video, and you've got to be able to look at them in the eye and be like, do they understand what I'm telling them to do? Are they asking me questions that make it seem like they know what they need to do? Again, it's all about understanding. And depending on the people that you're working with, if they're in the same country as you or a totally different country, you're dealing with different cultures, and different cultures of people, of course, interact and communicate differently. But one thing's universal truth. You get somebody on video, you look them in the eye, and you can have a better idea of like, do they know what I'm talking about? Okay, so it's really important. Number 3 on my list is problem detection. When you show up at a status meeting, it's a lot easier to find out as a manager. Ask the probing questions. Hey, this big thing, the sales team, we've got this deadline, where are we at? And maybe if you didn't have the meeting, nobody would speak up because they don't have the courage to speak up. But you get on this meeting, all of a sudden you can force the critical questions. Where are we on this thing? And sometimes that's just what you have to do. Or you're asking like, hey, we talked yesterday about the SQL performance issue. What did you find out? Where are we? Right? Like, it gives you the ability to ask these probing questions. Now, could you do this asynchronously? Yes, you could if your team really communicates very, very, very well asynchronously, but a lot of people are still shy, like I said. The number 4 on my list is coordination. One of my favorite things in status meetings isn't the fact that, hey, I just want to let you guys know I finished my work item. It's, I finished it, and hey, so-and-so, I need you to do your thing now, and Joe, you can test it on Friday, and oh, by the way, guys, don't forget when we deploy this to production, we've got to do these SQL changes and do this and do this. I just want to make sure everybody knows, right? Like, there's some of that kind of coordination that helps a lot. And again, that takes like 30 seconds. Again, could you do it asynchronously? Yes, but something about meetings forces communication, right? And it forces you to stop and collaborate instead of you forget to do it over text. And that gets to my number 5. It forces action. There's something about life where, we are procrastinators. We don't work on a schedule. There's something about meetings. We look on our calendar like, hey, at this time of day, I have this meeting. I know I got to get this crap done because I have that meeting. Or I know I'm going to meet with so-and-so and we're going to collaborate together and I'm just going to finally make the decision. I'm finally going to make the decision. I've been thinking about it for a week. I could have made it a week ago, but you know what? Something about this meeting is going to force me to do what needs to be done, holds me accountable. There's something about meetings that just does that. Now, can you do all these things without meetings? Yeah, potentially you can. But meetings are a tool, and we've talked about a lot of different reasons here about how they can help with product knowledge, understanding, detecting problems within the team, coordination, forcing action. These are all great reasons. But there's number 6, I think is the most important, and that's team bonding. You are never going to bond with a team talking to somebody only over text. Like, you might as well just be chatting with AI, and it's just like a bot you're chatting with, right? If you really want to get to know your team, you've got to talk to them and build rapport with them. And it is so critical for every other part of what you're doing to have this team bonding. And part of the reason why, I mentioned earlier, courage. One of the most important things that you've got to work with on your team and understanding everybody on your team is how much they speak up, how much do they understand things. And the more you build this team bonding with them, the more that they sort of have a safe space and you have a relationship with them that they feel more comfortable to speak up. They feel more comfortable to raise their hand and be like, you know what? I don't agree with you. There's a better way to do this. Or I didn't get my stuff done and I need help. Like, a lot of people are scared to say those kinds of things. But if you build and you create a better relationship with them, you're creating a trust and space that these people are willing to have that courage and step up. But you've got to do some team bonding to create it. So those are my 6 tips for you. I think meetings are super critical for different reasons. I hate stand-up meetings that are just like status. Forget that. I want to talk about collaboration. What did we get done? What does everybody need to know? What are our blockers? I want to talk about collaboration time. To me, stand-ups are great for team bonding and collaboration. A lot of the things I just mentioned. I've worked before with some great product operations kind of people that were really great at running the team. They're really great at requirements, running the day-to-day stand-ups, but it all kind of felt very robotic to me. Super valuable, but the best managers were able to listen in on these meetings and hear the issues. They hear like, you know what, I don't think they understand what they're really working on. Or, you know what, I bet there's something this person's not thinking about that they need to know. Like, I need to remind them that they need to know this thing. Like, there's a lot of these things that happen that when you're in these meetings, and if you're a really good manager, you just have the pulse of the team, and it helps you remind everybody of what to do and what not to do. Again, can you do all this asynchronously via text? Maybe you can, and maybe your team works really well that way. But even just really short meetings can help force some of these things to happen. And I would not discount the importance of team bonding. So I hope this was helpful today. My tips about meetings. I don't like meetings like anybody else does. And I will honestly say, as an engineering manager earlier in my career, I was the person that was guilty of showing up at these meetings and not even paying attention. Like, I'm heads down trying to solve. And if there's probably any key takeaway from this today, as a manager, that's the number one thing you have to work on if you struggle. You've got to be present and engaged, because your primary job is to help everybody else be more productive, not for you to be in the meeting and head down trying to fix some SQL issue unless production is down. But otherwise, you've got to stay focused on how do you help everybody else be more productive, and how do you best leverage meetings to make everybody else more productive. That's key to being an engineering leader. All right, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Product Driven.